Meeting 15th of March 2021. Warm welcome to Mayor, Councillors, committee members and our staff who are here and the public that are watching this meeting. Call for apologies for the meeting. Have the staff received any apologies? No apologies.
Francois.
Yep, an apology from Whakawhai Tūmahai.
So, pay your fate.
Who are you on the right? Yep. Okay. Someone to move that the apologies be accepted. The apology from Francois. That's wished the Mayor. Seconded Councillor Martin. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? The resolution's carried. Thank you. We have the interest register as circulated on Microsoft Teams, also available here today in a hard copy. If you do have any changes, please let them be known to the Executive Assistant. And at the time the matter is discussed, if there is any potential perceived conflict of interest for any agenda items. Are there any urgent items not on the agenda? There being no urgent items, we'll move through to the minutes of the previous committee meeting, which was held the 12th of November 2020. The minutes have been circulated and taken as read, and no corrections to those minutes have been received. I'm looking for a mover to move that they are true and accurate record of the meeting.
I believe that yourself and Councillor Hartshorn and myself are the only three there, so I'm happy to move.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm happy to second that those minutes are a true and accurate record of the meeting held 12th of November 2020. I'll put the resolution to vote. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? The resolution is carried, and I approve that my digital signature be added to the confirmed Planning and Regulatory Services Committee meeting minutes of the 12th of November 2020. The action list is our next agenda item. It's on page 4 of the agenda as circulated, and I welcome Fiona Scadden, the Planning Manager, to speak to this report.
Thank you. So, Town Centre draft plan. So this started to make some gains at the end of last year. It has been held up at the start of this year. Definitely still working on it in the background, but have not obviously met the deadline having a draft. I had a very draft document to the committee prior to Christmas, but not a locked down version. So definitely working to get that compiled and out for discussion around the table, and then after that, obviously, out to community for some community engagement and consultation.
Thank you very much for that. Having only one action item, I'll now open it up for discussion in relation to the Town Centre plan draft. Paul, do you have any comments on that? Councillor Hartshorn? No. Worship?
Only that the initial work that's been done, of course, it's just the start. It's been very interesting. General public really supportive. This is the odd one. There's several clearly not making a bit of noise, but it's a trial, and I'm encouraged by the feedback I've had personally.
Cool. The only comment I'd have in relation to this is ensuring that we're part of it and that the community part of it, but particularly now that we've got a lot of work on in the corporate strategy space at the moment, the development of the LTP and your reports and the like. I just would probably like to see this as a standing item, similar to what we've got as a standing item for discussion. And we'll, through a workshop today, set up a mechanism for dealing with short to medium term CBD matters. Cool. We'll take the report as received, and I'm looking for a mover in that direction, please, that we receive the action list. I moved Councillor Hartshorn, seconded Worship the Mayor. put the resolution as proposed. Those against? No one is against. The motion is unanimous. I'm going to move to that way of calling for resolutions to be carried, if that's all right. Complies with our standing orders? Yes, cool. Thank you. There are no presentations for the committee this afternoon, so we now move into agenda item 7, which is our staff reports. And I welcome back our planning manager to talk to the standing items on the committee's agenda and current projects we will update. Fiona.
Thank you. So going, I guess, revisiting town centre plans, and it is a standing item. Just made it clear that we're still working on drafting the town centre strategy with regard to Revel Street. Just a bit of an update. So obviously we got the bones vision in time for Wild Foods Weekend. It is still a work in progress and it is very temporary, and it's quite fluid, so we are moving things as necessary. We've had some feedback, for example, about an area, well, one particular business wanting more of the seating area in front of their business, and another business wanting less and more car parking in front of theirs, so we're working with that. So currently we are working to complete the timber planters. They'll be getting installed this week. So that's to delineate the ends of the eating areas and to separate off the pedestrian access for the pedestrian area from the vehicle way. And we'll hopefully soften the look a little bit, because it does look a little bit industrial down here at the moment, but as I said, it's a temporary trial, so we didn't want to be expending a huge amount of money at the same time. So there will be some more seating area going. We are looking, we've noted that even though there are no camper van signs down here, there's still a lot of camper vans making their way down here, so we've wanted much larger signs to try and make that more obvious. And yeah, we're just looking at, or working with the businesses at the moment around what's working and what's not, and seeing what adjustments we can make to fit with them. So we have set up an email address to take comments about Revel Street. So I know that there's a lot of opinion on Facebook, but we're actually not getting a lot of proper useful feedback through the actual system, which is, it's literally revelst@westlanddc.co.nz, .govt.nz. So hopefully we'll get some decent feedback. We are continuing to have discussions with shop owners, and we will continue to touch base with them as time goes through to find out whether there's advantages, disadvantages, how things are working for them. So yeah, obviously being a trial, we want to keep a really close eye on that. Are there any questions around that?
No, I like the way, through you, Mr. Chair, I like the way you've, the yellow things look a bit ugly, but at least when the trial's over, they'll be able to go back out to Westroads and they'll be used again. So no wasting money there. It's a good idea.
Yeah, just to clarify the yellow as well, unfortunately, bollards have different colours for different purposes. So we had to avoid using colours that meant other things like cycle trails.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, so yellow is the way to go apparently when it comes to roading functions.
No comment. Paul.
My only comment is that people need to just take a deep breath and let the trial run and see, when no one's committed to it. It's worth having a look and seeing it after a measured period of time. 6 months gives enough time. But the picnic tables do look out of place, and they're on the wrong side of the street. I mean, cripes, coming into winter time, I don't think many people are going to be sitting down there with their tacos. But overall, though, let's see how it pans out.
And just to clarify, that is a timing issue. We didn't have time to get the ones on the other side of the street in place before Wild Food City will be on the other side of the street, on the sunny side.
Yeah. Leave your code in your hand there. Councillor Hartshorn.
Yeah, no, just as Paul said, just let the bit of time pass and get the feedback. But the longer it is, probably the less people will worry about it and enjoy it more. That's all I've got to say.
Something interesting, I mean, there's obviously a lot of feedback around that, but I think something that's come to light is how quickly you could actually change a number of parking spaces in the community and achieve a lot more car park. And there is Hamilton Street, which is both side parallel at the moment, very little angle parking, so, and it's a very wide street, and it's an area for development, considerable development in the future. So that is feedback, I think, around, because people's perception initially was car parks would be off. So addressing that. And the other thing is around pedestrian access through the CBD, and actually probably the only town that doesn't have any designated pedestrian crossings. And I know it's not too much of an issue at the moment without a large number of international tourists. However, it's probably the right time to start training, particularly locals and domestic tourists, where is an appropriate place to cross. And I'm thinking particularly beach access into Well Lane, opposite Take Note, and also guiding people. Doesn't have to be formal pedestrian crossings, but encouraging people to stick and walk to the pedestrian havens in the middle of the road and carry on through that way rather than walking all around, because it's very hokitika at the moment. People stop for pedestrians, which is great, but there's no clear place to walk. So it would be cool to see some work done for actually adding some pedestrian crossings to the CBD, or some clearly delineated places where pedestrians can cross. And that will happen more and more with Rebel Street, I think. People walking out in between cars rather than sticking to one place, because the road corridor is actually thinner, narrower. People will cross in different places and come out in between cars.
So both of those matters, so the car parking is definitely in town centre strategy ideas. You'll note that we've done the top end of Hamilton Street just to see how much you can stack in there, which is a lot. So that's definitely on the plan. We've got beautifully wide streets around Hokitika, so we can actually sort of capitalise on that a lot more for car parking. With regard to crossing, that is definitely something again that will be dealt with through the strategy, but with regard to the Rebel Street trial, the intention is to have an area coming out of Well Lane, across in front of Take Note there, basically, to create an area that will funnel people into the one place, but it won't be like a zebra crossing. It'll be paintwork that encourages people to cross at one point as opposed to actually shepherding them. So
why do we? Yeah, no, that's a trial. Why do we not have any pedestrian crossings? Do we know? Is that historical? We've just never introduced them. Is there a regulatory reason why we can't have pedestrian crossings?
It's not a regulatory reason, but the studies that were done found that Hokitika is actually naturally a very pedestrianised town, and it was recommended that actually we're doing pedestrianisation really well. So I think it has just not gone any further.
Just through the chair, Bob Tolley, if you recall, was here 3 years ago and did an audit, and actually was totally against trying to corral people down certain avenues, particularly if the area is safe to walk through. Slowing the CBD down to 30 k's is going to make a significant difference as well.
But might for nice, calm, placid drivers like you, someone. I'm sure it's only going to elevate the road rage in some,
but I think not only crossing but raised crossings, which is quite common in built up areas, actually creates that natural slowdown as well, and that's what I would like to see incorporated in future state. Definitely a common practice around some of the key tourist areas in New Zealand and overseas.
Very stilted at the moment. You approach the end of Weld, you hit a compulsory stop, which I think now more people are actually stopping at, and then you have to kind of do a half turn, and then you are giving way to pedestrian traffic. So some thought on that would be really good, but it sounds like it is there and it is going to happen to some degree, so that's good. We'll carry on through to unless Ian, you had anything to add? Carry on through to the racecourse case.
Can I just make?
Sorry.
So, just been discussing the interpretation panels with regards to the town centre as well. Not only town centre, but the Culture and Heritage Fund that was approved. So unfortunately, with the passing of Dave Stapleton, that project's come to a slight halt. So Jackie's discussed with MB in terms of just getting an extension to that project. So we'll be picking that up in April again and finalising that. It's obviously long overdue, it was meant to be completed quite some time ago.
That's great. Can we pick some of that discussion up, particularly around, there's a couple of projects in this space, and one of them council was involved in actually doing, and some have been externally funded. So particularly around the 2 totem poles that are in the CBD. It would be good to maybe in the workshop today just discuss that and process where we're going. Thank you. Thanks for that update, Simon, on today's comments. The racecourse in Cass Square.
Okay, so as you know, Cass Square sat on its own. We looked at concepts and proposals for what to do to upgrade that area, and took in quite a lot of consultation and conversation around it over the years. And then we got the racecourse. So whatever happens at the racecourse will affect Cass Square and vice versa. So we've been having some stakeholder meetings over this month, and hopefully by the end of this month we will have finished most of them around sports users of Cass Square. So we're looking at the different codes that are playing sports in and around Hokitika, and a lot of them are codes that don't have a home here, that are travelling to Greymouth all the time, and just looking at whether whether their preference is to be putting more time and energy into Cass Square and bringing that into a multi-purpose facility that is really zhuzhed up for them, or whether we are doing a bare minimum on Cass Square, or not a bare minimum, but we're delegating the sports energy and resource and funding up to the racecourse. So what we're hearing is that people are actually really happy with Cass Square. They're not happy about not being able to get onto the paddocks until partway through the season because of obviously events, meaning that there has to be maintenance on the grounds. We're hearing that they love the idea of there being a purpose-built facility up at the racecourse, but they don't believe that that's a now option. They're seeing that as a long-term option because of the cost and time involved, and so they would like to see a multi-purpose facility at Cass Square. And all have indicated that if we're able to mark out the different fields, even in different colours, that they would all look at using them. So at the moment, for example, the Typos only play in Greymouth, the football only plays in Greymouth, whereas if we put more time and energy into facilitating the Cass Square, then they would look at bringing the games back down here, so we could potentially have Greymouth teams coming back this way instead of all going one way. We've still got a few to talk to, but that's the common themes that we're hearing so far. Based on what we get from them, we'll form a bit of it. We're also dealing with some stakeholders that are currently using the racecourse and looking at their wants and needs as well. And when we are ready with the racecourse, we'll be putting out some very loose proposals because they won't be locked in stone. It'll be open for engagement and discussion from the community. Put those together and put those out as a discussion document for more feedback about the proposals. Once we have that, then we can start putting the actual concepts together. Any questions on that?
Go this way this time. Worship.
Not that I want to get into it. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion coming ahead of us, and it's good that the planning has actually started. Clearly, there's a lot of potential uses. Long way to go.
Yeah.
Councillor Hartshaw.
You're on mute, Ian.
It comes back to dollars and cents and timeframes, I suppose, doesn't it? It's going to be a while before race you could do anything up at the race course. So yeah, I suppose the teams that are playing are happy with it. So I suppose it's the thing to do in the time being.
Thank you. Paul.
Yeah, so obviously it's always been a very long-term vision, but you can't move forward unless you have that vision. And so it's good planning. And I agree with the feedback that's seems to have been floated so far, because I've always believed that Cass Square is the sports hub and not the racecourse. Just because the racecourse comes along, I think that's an ideal events arena. I think Cass Square could be developed more, as you say, with a multi-purpose sports hub of some description there that bigger towns and small towns have at their main sports grounds as well, which we're lacking. I, however, think that we don't need the two fields in use all at once. I think that one field would be enough, as long as it's properly maintained, and that that other area could be used for that multi-purpose. It could have a hockey turf. It could have, just a more multi-purpose amenity all around. I agree with the thinking that the racecourse long-term future should be more towards an events arena.
Thank you. Any other? Good evening, good afternoon, sorry. Good afternoon, Councillor Kennedy.
Apologies.
Thank you. Apologies noted. We now move through to the consent applications received and consents granted.
Right, so since the last meeting, we've had 51 consents received and 28 of those consents have been granted. So these are all available on our website with a weekly summary that goes up to let you know who's doing what. So we're still moving along quite quickly. Just for your information as well, the land information memoranda, the LIMs are still coming in thick and fast, so things are still happening around Hokitika, largely for Hokitika, but throughout Westland in general. It's quite interesting to see the numbers still up there.
Through the chair,
Open that up for discussion.
just wondering whether the new builds, subdivisions, for instance, if that's commensurate with the hyperactivity in housing stock movements.
We're still probably only getting the same amount of consents through for new builds. Te Aroha might be able to comment from the building department point of view, but in terms of the resource consents, we're still steady, but they don't seem to have lifted. It seems to be existing properties are turning over very quickly, but there are all sections turning over too, so potentially they're going to be new builds.
Interesting.
Did you want to comment further to that?
I think it's pretty much resource consents for new, if that was happening, with builder consents coming through the system. And one feeds into the other, so yeah.
Any questions in relation to the consents received and consents processed?
How do they compare to a year or two ago?
I haven't run the stats, but it is pretty on par with being normal. Yeah. Usually we're sort of steady at this time of year, and for some reason around June, July, August we go a bit mad, so it'll be interesting to see if it still jumps up at that stage compared to what it has in the past.
That's odd though, isn't it, through the chair, that the building consents, new building consents are steady as she goes, and yet the existing housing stock is white hot.
I suspect it seems like a lot of the properties that are selling really quickly are absentee landowners. So I think there's a lot of investment property. That's just a complete opinion. It's not a fact. Just from what I'm noting, it seems to be the case.
And if you were wanting to build a new dwelling somewhere in the CBD, in the old Townbelt East, Townbelt West sort of space, unless it's a blank section, you have to buy existing and probably demolished. So we don't have residential growth areas, and we don't have industrial growth areas either identified yet. So that's that, dealing with that should hopefully see a future plan for where residential can go. Because if
That's only within the strict confines of the town belts.
you'd have to be the three main new subdivisions, terrace type subdivisions, aren't they, around here?
I mean, the town belts haven't applied
Oh no,
in
I know.
this town for 50 more years,
Yeah.
really. And yet the town is still defined in population by what's strictly between those town belts. It's just
really
crazy.
interesting.
Because you just move out of it with a radius of 1 kilometre and you can add another 1,000 easy.
So that's right, and it's not zoned correctly. It's not, you're rural. So there's all these factors that we can affect and change, and hopefully we will with one district plan. Councillor Hartshorn.
Yes, through the chair, I was just wondering, in those stats, is there a comparison between commercial and residential, or?
No, we haven't seen a huge amount of commercial growth, to be honest. A lot of it is residential. I'd have to go back through the applications to have a decent crunch of those numbers. I was just going to add with regard to the subdivision, so obviously things might not be compressed nicely into those town boundaries, but we have seen a huge increase at Blue Spur, 3 Mile and Canary. So Canary obviously is zoned appropriately, and the others are sites that have been ear-tagged for future, looking at sort of it's not called rural residential under the new terms, but that kind of a zone that allows for that residential use and protects the residential rights, but it is still a rural environment.
Councillor Kennedy.
I wonder, Fiona, whether the new building standards where consents are not required for some buildings are having an impact on those numbers too. Obviously you won't know, but for sheds and things like that, perhaps they were being consented but now they're not, so therefore the building throughout the district may be increasing.
I can answer that.
Answer the planning part first.
Sorry.
So with regard to that, the planning rules don't always trigger when the building rules do. So there are permitted activities that would need a building consent but don't need a resource consent, and vice versa. There's also rules that would reach the district plan but might not require a building consent. And then the second part of that.
So as you'll recall, as part of the discussions leading up in terms of budget planning, we have already there's evidence there of at least a 20% drop in building consents and value, but that's purely because of the exemptions for Schedule 1 that changed as of August last year. So there's still a lot of building going on around the district in terms of sheds and carports and things that are now, instead of 10 square metres, 30 square metres, not requiring consent. But no, it's not necessarily coming through the system. But what we do see as a result of that then is from the enforcement side, when people complain about people that should have applied for building consent. So that's starting to take up a little bit of time as well. So it's, one of those things that we preempted out of our control. But in terms of building as a whole, much like planning, the only commercial that's in activity are those applications that were already in train prior to the impacts of COVID-19. There were a number that were starting to come forward in terms of South Westland, but obviously they've either pulled those consents or put the brakes on. It's to wait and see, and both you and Councillor Hartshorn will be aware of some of those. So we're just waiting to see what happens when we can come up outside the other side of whatever's going to happen moving forward with the impacts from COVID.
Any further questions on that standing item? We've got the consent applications received and consents granted from a resource and parklet building perspective. Thank you so much for the update. And the final is a standing item for other business. And Fiona would like to give us a mining consent applications process update around road reserves.
So this stems from a conversation that I've had with Melanie Anderson, CEO at Destination Westland. it appears that they had concerns that there was a hole in the loop around getting licences to occupy at the time that we're signing off affected party approvals for mining road reserve. Interestingly, I believe that we haven't actually had applications, which I now need to, or have been following up for Regional Council and will follow up further, to assess whether we're just not getting sent them or whether there just haven't been applications that include the mining of road reserve in the last 6 to 12 months. So how it should work, and this is a process that is in place, and we will make sure that it's getting followed, because like I say, once I get hold of Regional Council, I'll ensure that this is how it works, is that the application comes to us as an affected party because it's our infrastructure, I suppose. If we are okay with it, or actually as soon as we receive it, it should be going to Destination Westland as well. And when Destination Westland agree to a licence to occupy, we sign off the affected party approval and the mining consent continues with Regional Council. So I just need to go through the parties involved in that and ensure that that is definitely continuing to happen and will continue to happen. But I do believe that their estimate of revenue that's down is potentially because we haven't actually received the applications in the first place.
Through the chair, you refer to a licence to occupy, you mean an access agreement?
They used to call it a licence to occupy. Is it an access agreement now?
In relation to mining, I don't believe it's ever been called a licence to occupy. It's an access agreement, and
okay.
So we should keep an eye on that. But it's good that you're onto it. It's when someone digs up a council road or council land, they're in the same category as someone who digs up Ngāi Tahu land or any farmland. They pay 8% and of the gold recovered, and it's an area where we've had a gap for some time, and I'm very pleased that you're looking into it.
Councillor Hartshall, any comments?
No, but it's just what Bruce said there is, the Mayor has said that, yeah, it's good that they're going to be paying a royalty to the council. That's very good, but nothing else to comment.
Councillor Kennedy, anything to know? They get told otherwise.
Yeah, I'd certainly get told off them. This is accepting, is it the one we had just recently, agreement with the insolvent track? That a road reserve, it was a land swap.
That process hasn't been completed, or that report was withdrawn. So it's pulled that report until we've done further research on it.
But that would be the kind of scenario that we would be looking
Right, that's what we're looking at.
So just to ensure we've got that, are you able to document a policy or procedure and then have that noted by us at the next meeting, but also maybe then at the whatever the West Coast Regional Council uses for their, maybe they need to note it there politically as well. So it's really entrenched that that's what happens, because we think it's happening, don't we? But we also think that we may not have had one for 12 to 18 months. So
there's, through the chair, there is already a policy within council for unformed regional roads, entitled back to the Econ on it. We are reviewing that at the moment to make sure it does meet all the conditions, ensure that we are covering multiple types of use. So that's under draft review at the moment. But definitely the process we need to confirm is actually very clear.
So we haven't signed off any approval, affected party approval for the last 18 months.
not for digging up on road reserve. So we have signed off where a bridge has been used for access, or it's near to a road that we need to approve that it's not going to affect the road, but not the actual mining of road reserve. I don't believe we've had any consents come through for that. I need to follow up on this further.
That would be great, and we'll get, can we please have an update, an email update on that, and then we'll note the procedure at the next meeting, and I think then we can ask the regional council to do the same, Destination Western, to ensure it's part of their systems too. So, yeah, cool. Thank you. Any further questions on those standing item updates? Right, then I'm looking for someone to move that the standing item current projects verbal update from the planning manager be received and accepted. Moved Councillor Kennedy. Seconded is Worship Mayor. I'll put the resolution. Is there anyone against? No, the resolution is carried. Thank you. Now we move to agenda item 8, which is the resolution to go into public excluded. We will be going into public excluded to consider the confidential minutes and also a staff report in relation to the 3 Mile subdivision. Could I please have a mover to move us into public excluded?
Sorry, Chair, the workshop that are we going to have a workshop after this? Is that correct?
Yep. So the plan is to we will go through the public part of the meeting, which we're coming to the conclusion of now. We'll move into public excluded, which is not live streamed, and then we will come out of public excluded. We will then either close the meeting or adjourn the meeting. And then we will work, because depending on the timing, because we'll need to move into workshop.
And sorry, will the workshop be, publicly viewed or whatever, or not?
The workshop's not being live streamed, no.
Okay, righto.
But we will. I wanted a mechanism to ensure that any direction that councillors give is captured as part of the public portion of our minutes. And that's the compromise we've agreed.
No, that's cool. I've just, do the people know what items are on the public workshop, or like the know?
Oh, okay.
Do they know what items are in the workshop? Because obviously there's an issue that needs to be raised, but obviously we're going to workshop it. But
yes, okay. So, yep. Good point. At the conclusion of this meeting, we're going into workshop to discuss Te Tai Pōtini plan, the One District plan, Jackson Bay Wharf and car parking, specified zoning areas, and car parking and signage within the district. So the other things we've signalled to the public that we will be discussing. And any recommendations or directives from this committee need to be done through the meeting, not through workshops. So that's why we need to, if we need to resolve anything, which at this stage it looks like we won't, they seem to be for our FYI, then they will be, it will not be live streamed, but if we do need to resolve anything, it will be captured in the minutes.
No, hey, that's sweet. I'm just happy that the people know in the public section what we are going to be talking about, and I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Appreciate that. Someone prepared to move us into public excluded. Councillor Kennedy, seconded. It's Worship the Mayor. Put the resolution. Is there anyone against? No. Resolution's carried. Thank you very much. We'll now adjourn the meeting for 2 minutes to allow the committee to disconnect from Zoom, from the open section of the meeting, and reconnect via the second Zoom link. Thank you to the members of the public that have participated.